I thought I was building a future with the woman I loved, until one night, in a room full of her colleagues, she humiliated me with a single sentence. That was the moment I realized, she never truly respected me. And what I did next? Well, let's just say, I left her speechless. My name is Eric, and today, I want to share my story. It's about someone I had known for years, someone I trusted, someone I was ready to spend my life with. I thought I knew her. I thought we had built something unbreakable. But in a single moment, everything changed. That moment didn't just reveal who she really was, it forced me to see what I had been ignoring for far too long. Before I tell you what happened, let me take you back to the beginning, to when things were good. Because at one point, they were good. Or at least, that's what I believed. Vanessa and I had been together for years. We didn't rush into anything. Our relationship had depth, history. I had been by her side through every challenge she faced, long before she landed her dream job at a top consulting firm. Back when she was struggling to find her path, questioning what came next, I was there. I encouraged her, helped her prepare for interviews, and stayed up late listening to her frustrations over rejection emails. I believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. I made sure she never felt like she wasn't good enough. Photography was my dream, not just a hobby, but my passion, my career, my life. I worked hard, saved every penny, and invested in the best camera equipment I could afford. I built my portfolio from the ground up, starting with small local events and working my way up to getting my work featured in well-known magazines. And I wasn't just getting by, I was thriving. I was proud of what I had built. At first, Vanessa was proud of me too. She would talk about my work with excitement, telling people, Eric is insanely talented. His photos are incredible. She showed off my pictures, bragged about the time my work got published. She saw me for who I was, someone who turned passion into something real, something meaningful. I never thought that would change. But little by little, it did. At first, the signs were subtle, little comments that I brushed off. Vanessa had just started her new job at the consulting firm, and I knew she was under a lot of stress. Long hours, important clients, the pressure to prove herself, I figured I could handle it if she was a little distant. But then, the way she spoke about my work shifted. It wasn't outright disrespectful at first. It was more like small jabs, easy to ignore. The first time it happened, we were at dinner, going over wedding plans. I was excited, talking about a new camera lens I had been saving up for. She sighed and said, "You should get a real job with a stable salary. Weddings are expensive, you know." She laughed afterward, brushing it off as a joke. I didn't dwell on it. Then, a few weeks later, we were out at the mall when she ran into a coworker. She waved but didn't call me over right away. When she returned, she said she hadn't introduced me because she didn't know how to explain what I did. I stood there, confused. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself she didn't mean anything by it. But then came the third time. And this time, there was no mistaking what she meant. We were at home, having a casual conversation, when she suddenly said, "I mean, photography is nice, but it's not exactly a career, right?" She said it so casually, like the thought had barely even crossed her mind. But in that moment, it hit me, she wasn't joking. She actually believed it. Vanessa saw what I did, what I had built from the ground up, not as a profession, but as some side hobby. Not something real. Still, I let it slide. I made excuses for her, convincing myself she didn't mean any harm. After all, this was Vanessa, the woman I had loved for years, the woman who had once supported me without question. So, I told myself it wasn't a big deal. I pushed it aside. Looking back, that was my first mistake. A few weeks later, Vanessa invited me to her company's annual office party as her plus one. The venue was upscale, a private event hall with towering glass walls, sleek modern decor, and a sea of well-dressed professionals who looked like they belonged there. There was an energy in the room, a kind of polished confidence, an effortless charm. Conversations flowed easily, filled with talk of big deals, promotions, and six-figure salaries. I wasn't intimidated, not exactly, but I could feel the difference between their world and mine. Vanessa introduced me to a small group of her colleagues, 4 or 5 of them, all holding drinks, laughing, chatting about work and their latest travels. I stood beside her, nodding along as they discussed an upcoming project with a major client. Then, one of them, a guy in a crisp navy suit, probably around our age, turned to me with polite curiosity and asked, "So, Eric, what do you do?" His tone was friendly enough, but I could already see the assumptions in his eyes. Maybe he thought I worked in consulting. Maybe tech. Something that fit into their world. Before I could answer, Vanessa spoke for me. She let out a small amused scoff, the kind that makes it clear she's about to say something funny. "Oh, Eric," she said, swirling her drink with a smirk. "His job is basically just taking fancy selfies for money." The second the words left her mouth, the entire group laughed. Not just a chuckle, real laughter, full of amusement, like she had just delivered the joke of the night. Some of them exchanged knowing glances, smirking like they suddenly got something about me they hadn't before. One of the women even nodded and said, "Oh, that's cute."
I stood there, feeling the laughter press in around me. And for the first time I saw Vanessa clearly. This wasn't just a slip-up. Not an innocent joke. This was how she actually saw me. How she had probably always seen me. In her eyes, I wasn't a photographer. I wasn't someone who had built something meaningful. I was just a guy who took selfies for money. And in that moment, everything, the small comments, the passive-aggressive remarks, finally made sense. She had hesitated whenever people asked what I did. And now, I finally understood why. Vanessa wasn't proud of me. She wasn't proud to be with me. To her, my career wasn't real, wasn't respectable enough to stand beside hers. And in that moment, one thing became painfully clear: I wasn't going to spend my life with someone who looked down on me. I stood there, gripping my drink a little tighter than before. Then, I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Setting my glass down, I turned to Vanessa, met her eyes, and said, "If you don't respect what I do, then you don't respect me. And I won't spend my life with someone who belittles me." The room fell dead silent. I could feel eyes shifting between us, waiting to see how she would react. Vanessa stared at me, wide-eyed, her mouth parting slightly before she let out a nervous laugh, like she still thought she could brush this off. But I wasn't laughing. Without breaking eye contact, I reached for her hand, slid the engagement ring off her finger, and slipped it into my pocket. A few gasps. Some hushed whispers. Someone near the bar muttered, "Damn." But I didn't linger. I didn't need an audience for this. Without another word, I turned and walked out, calm, deliberate, removing myself from a place where I was clearly not valued. I didn't look back to see her face. I didn't have to. Because for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly where I stood. At first, Vanessa didn't reach out. Not a single text. Not a single call. Nothing. And honestly, I wasn't surprised. She had always been too proud to admit when she was wrong, too proud to face anything that might make her look bad. After that night, she must have felt humiliated. Not just because I left her standing there in front of her colleagues, but because I did it on my terms. I wasn't the one being laughed at anymore. I was the one who walked away. And for someone like Vanessa, someone who cared so much about appearances, that had to sting. Then, weeks later, the silence broke. Out of nowhere, she sent a message. It was long, but the words were predictable. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I didn't mean it like that. You know I respect you. I was just joking, and I didn't realize how it came across. Can we talk?" I read it and just sat there, letting the words sink in.
If she had sent this right after the party, if she had reached out when it actually mattered, maybe, just maybe, I would have believed her. Maybe I would have thought it was a moment of poor judgment, that she was genuinely sorry. But after weeks of silence, after acting like nothing had happened, no. This wasn't about regret. This was about damage control. She wasn't reaching out because she had finally realized she disrespected me. She was reaching out because she didn't like how it made her look, to her friends, to her colleagues, to the family members expecting to be at our wedding. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I just saw things clearly now. Vanessa had never been proud of me. She had tolerated my career, but she had never respected it. She wanted a fiancé who fit into her world, someone with the kind of title she could show off. And I was never going to be that person. She wouldn't have to explain me to anyone ever again. And that was fine. Because I was never meant to be someone she had to justify. So I replied, not out of spite, not to argue, but simply to close the chapter. I appreciate the message. I wish you all the best, Vanessa. I really do. But it's best if we both move on. Short. Simple. Final. She didn't respond. And I knew she wouldn't. That was the moment I realized, I deserved better. I deserved someone who didn't just tolerate my dreams but actually believed in them. Someone who wouldn't laugh at my passion, whether we were alone or in a room full of people. And once I accepted that, I knew exactly what I had to do next. I packed my bags. Our small town had been my comfort zone for too long, and I wasn't going to sit there, haunted by the memories of a life that almost happened. I had always dreamed of taking my photography to the next level, and there was only one place I knew I could make that happen. New York. It was intimidating. It was expensive. But for the first time in a long time, I was making a decision purely for me. No compromises. No doubts. Just a man chasing what he loves. And that felt like real freedom. I said yes to every opportunity, fashion shoots, events, travel gigs, anything that challenged me and expanded my portfolio. I worked harder than ever, but this time, it felt different. This time, it felt like I was building something real. Something no one could belittle. Months passed, and I wasn't just getting by, I was thriving. Then one day, I got an email that changed everything. One of my photographs had been shortlisted for a major international award. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. I reread the email 3 times just to be sure. But no, it was real. Out of thousands of entries from all over the world, my work had been chosen. And when I finally saw my name listed as the winner, I just sat there, staring at the screen. Not because I couldn't believe it, but because I could. I had always believed in myself. Even when others didn't. And now, the world was seeing what I had always known. I was damn good at what I did. I don't know if Vanessa ever saw the news. Maybe she regretted how things ended. Maybe she convinced herself she had been right all along. But honestly, I don't care. That part of my life is closed. What I do know is this, out of everything I gained after walking away, the biggest win wasn't the award. It wasn't the recognition. It was the fact that, for the first time in a long time, I was surrounded by people who actually valued me. People who saw my work for what it was, art, not just fancy selfies. And among them was someone who didn't just admire what I did but respected it. Someone who saw me for who I was and never once made me feel small for it. Respect in a relationship is non-negotiable. That's something I had to learn the hard way. Because when someone repeatedly makes fun of your dreams, even if they laugh while saying it, even if they call it just a joke, you need to pay attention. Because jokes like that, they're not harmless. They tell you exactly how that person sees you. And if they don't respect what you do, they don't respect you. Period. I told myself it was nothing. That she didn't mean it. That maybe I was being too sensitive. But looking back, I see it clearly. Someone who loves you doesn't belittle what makes you happy. They don't make you feel small just because your path doesn't look like theirs. I walked away because I knew that staying meant losing myself. And trust me, it was hard. Ending an engagement in front of a room full of people. Not exactly how I pictured things going. But I'll tell you this. I have never once regretted choosing my self-respect over a relationship that made me feel like I wasn't enough. So if you're in a situation like that, if you're with someone who constantly downplays your passion, take a step back and ask yourself. Do I really want to spend my life proving my worth to someone who refuses to see it? Because here's the truth. You don't have to. The right person will see your value without you having to convince them. Anyway, that's my story. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with something like this? What would you have done in my place? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I read every single one. And if you found this story interesting, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Here are 10 powerful lessons to include at the end of your story. Respect is non-negotiable. If someone repeatedly belittles your dreams or passion, it's a sign they don't truly respect you. Love without respect isn't worth holding on to. Pay attention to the small comments, jokes and subtle digs about your career, passions, or ambitions aren't always harmless. They reveal how someone truly sees you. Your partner should uplift you, not undermine you. The right person will celebrate your achievements and support your growth, not downplay your success. You should never have to prove your worth. If someone doesn't see your value, no amount of explaining, proving, or compromising will change that. The right person will recognize it without being convinced. Don't ignore red flags for the sake of history. Just because you've been with someone for a long time doesn't mean you have to stay. People change, and so do relationships. Walking away is hard, but losing yourself is harder. Staying in a relationship where you're not valued will drain you more than the pain of leaving ever will. Bet on yourself. When you believe in your passion and work hard for it, success will come. The opinions of others don't define your potential. The right people will see your value. Surround yourself with people who genuinely respect and appreciate what you do. Your success will flourish in the right environment. Growth comes from letting go. Sometimes, leaving behind what's comfortable is the only way to reach your full potential. Stepping out of your comfort zone leads to real success. Self-respect is the biggest win, more than success, recognition, or love. Knowing your worth and refusing to settle is the greatest victory of all.